Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the TCEDC, the Taos County Economic Development Corporation. This is their commercial kitchen, which is there for public and private use to get your businesses going for small products in the food industry. And we're inviting people to learn how to can. Now, we know lots of you do that, and I'm sure you have things to teach me, but I'm just going to teach you what I know and some of the sort of key little things. For the overall deal, you're going to want to get a book on home canning and preserving. Like this one comes from the Ball Company, the same one that sells you these fancy jars, and you can get all the details. But we'll show you some of the tricks to get this done and what the TCEDC has to offer. So our goal is to turn many of these into a jar of this that's full of sauce or chunks or whatever. Okay, so the very first thing that we need to do is to think about bacteria the entire time. So the very first, when I take this jar out of the container and it's clean, when I say the container, I mean the box that you bought it in. You're going to take the ring off, you're going to take the lid off, and sometimes it's going to pop because here at Taos we are at a higher elevation. You're going to put it into a pot, some sort of a pot or a pan. And then what you're going to have is a pan full of lids, because you know what? These need to be sterilized. Okay? So I'm going to do that with, oops, we're not going to use that one. Bye. And we're going to take these clean lids. I think I can put 8 at a time in my canning jar. So I'm going to take 8 rings and 8 lids. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to fill it with water. Nope, that's boiling. I'm going to go fill it with water and put it on the stove. Great. So there, I have a pot or a pan that has 8 lids in it, and I'm going to put it on my stove, and I'm just going to go ahead and get it hot. I'm going to have at least 3 different pots going on at the same time. The lids, the actual apples are going to go in here, and the canning one is in the back, and that's going to have the jars. Okay, so now let's go back and process, show you how to process the jars to get them ready. Each one of these jars, I'm going to grab with one of these very special tools. It's a tongue that has little handles that roll so that you can get a good grip. And if you look at the angle of this, the shape of this plastic rimmed tongue, it goes right on top of a jar. Okay? So I can grab it like that and put it in the hot water without hurting myself. This pot right here has been preheated with hot water, so I'm going to take it out. It's nearly boiling. And I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to put it in, but you know what? Rather than putting it in straight down like this, I'm going to put it in on the side so it starts to fill with water as soon as possible. Remember, these are not Pyrex, these are not super duper special jars, and I don't want them to crack. You could also use one of these other types of tongs for the same process. I just put them like that, I put it upside down, and then I put it in the pot. And there, I can get 8 of these jars into this, all heating up at the same time. Now I'm going to turn this flame on and get this thing going, because I need to have all those jars in boiling water. Boiling water. Okay, that means a rolling boil. That means I have to see bubbles. Okay, yeehaw. And we're going to start processing. So what I have here is a food processor. This is a Cuisinart brand. Yeah, it's a little pricey. This is a really good thing to ask for a wedding present, but I'm a pretty strong guy. This is a heavy motor. You need a strong motor to really crank on those apples to really be able to puree. We're making applesauce today. We're not making chunked preserved apples. We're making applesauce. In New York, we call it applesauce. All right. And then I'm going to put this here, turn it sideways, And you're gonna see, you might see that what I've got here right now are a bunch of apple chunks. I can tell you from experience that that's not gonna work very well once this thing is completely full. So I've got a cup and a half of water here, and I'm gonna dump it in. And now I can keep adding apples. When I cut apples, there are a couple of different ways you can process them. You could try to core them with a device like this. This is a relatively cheap device. It's made of plastic. I've actually sharpened these blades, and I'm going to show you that, first of all, you're going to have to take that stem off. And if I go like this and I squeeze it down, you know, if you can find a good one that can core it, then actually that's pretty good. Let's say you've got stuff that has little bruises and a little bit of fungus among us growing on it. You really want to cut those off. So what I do is I turn it sideways until I find the part that I want to cut off, cut parallel next to it, and then do 4 cuts. And then this goes to the container for the leftovers. That can go to your pigs or your chickens or something like that. We don't want to waste the gifts from Mother Nature, right? And then what I would do is I would slice this off and get rid of the parts that have a little bruise on it and get rid of it. I find that my machine likes medium-sized pieces. It'll work faster if I put medium-sized pieces. Maybe I'm exaggerating, maybe not. If you want to, for knife safety, you want to curl your fingers and do what's called the claw. And when you do the claw, the knife is likely to go up against the knuckles, but it's not likely to go, owie! Okay, so use the claw when you're holding, and that's just you're holding your food, and that's a knife safety trick. So that goes in. For the sake of time, we're going to do this more quickly. Maybe I won't make them into small pieces. 4 cuts. You really want to go crazy and save every bit of apple that you have. You cannot throw out the core. You can cut off the very tip here and the very tip here, put those in. That has a little bit of fungus among us growing in there, so I'm not going to keep that. Let's keep that. Let's keep this part and dump that part in. By the way, sharp knives are safe knives. If you don't have a super duper sharpening instrument, you can always take 2 knives and do this sort of thing for a little bit. You will actually get a slightly sharper blade, and a sharp knife is a safe knife because you don't have to add a lot of force to make it do what you want it to do, right? Much safer. Okay. So I can use relatively little force and still get a nice slice here. Chop it a little bit. All right, let's see what this thing can do. One more. I'm going to get this thing full. One more apple. Folks, one of the reasons why we're doing this video and this instruction is because Taos has apples everywhere. 'Tis the season to be jolly about apples in the fall. You can really score yourself quite a few apples. Their neighbors that are more than happy to have you come to their land and take apples off their minds and off their labor to-do list. Okay, let's do one more. Different colors. It's okay to mix different apples. You get different flavors out of the deal. Okay. So we're back to our Cuisinart here. There's a safety mechanism here where this thing has to click, and it also not only has to come down, but it also has to rotate sideways. And then I can turn this on. Now I want you to watch here. At the beginning, you're going to see that most of the pureeing is going to happen on the bottom, right? This is all shredded, but that's all chunky. If you don't have the water in here, this will take forever. And you can really see that over time. Maybe I'll hold it to keep it steady. Nah, that's not going to make a difference. And then if it's still chunky on top, you can turn it off. I find you can use the pulse thing, which this is just an on-off button only when you're squeezing it. And sometimes it'll fluff up the apples that are on the inside or some of the other fruit and get the ones on the top to come down a little bit. All right, a little more. I think we're almost done. So you can see I've probably put in 10 apples there, and if I didn't have a strong Cuisinart or other food processor that has a really strong motor, it could just take forever or just not happen at all. Now I squeeze those two buttons, I take this off, I rotate it, and then I give it a smell. Let's give some to the cameraman. Let's have the cameraman smell it. Oh, great.
That was a COVID-safe sniff.
I can come this, right, safe sniffing, everybody, safe sniffing. There, you can see that my water is boiling. My water is boiling in my jar bath. I have a bath in which the jars are being sterilized. You know what? I broke this is a really nice stainless steel pot. I broke the glass lid on it. I just used a very large frying pan as a lid. There's no reason you can't improvise. I put in some water in this already, and I've boiled it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to pull the blade in and turn it sideways and shake it, and in go my apples. Now let's get this thing cranking. In my experience as a chemist, that's a chemist by training, I like to have my pot centered over the flame. It's just more efficient. Not only that, I use these little pieces of foil around because a lot of heat goes off the sides. And I do have I prefer a single piece stainless steel spoon. I can get that guy in there and really mix up. I put a little bit of water in the bottom. I'm going to knock it, and then I'm going to put it over a plate. I like to have a plate to keep my counter surface clean. I'm going to be moving instruments back and forth between the stove top, and I don't want that to make a mess. My pot of lids is already boiling. And that plastic is a very special plastic bead rubber, and it will not destroy itself. I'm going to turn off this flame. You know what? As long as those lids stay underneath the level of the water, this is safe to just leave until my apple sauce is actually hot enough and ready to go. So remember not to have pets or kids around in your kitchen while you're working for food safety reasons. There's boiling water here. Us adults, we are not going to freak out if we get a little spot of boiling water on our skin. Our kids are really going to be hurt and upset and kind of startled. So let's just keep them out of the kitchen when we're doing this process because it's hot. The knives, we want to keep the food safe and away from bacteria. We're at the TCEDC, folks. Let's show them a picture of this burner. This is a big burner, y'all. They're not messing around, okay? It puts out a lot of heat. You may not be able to see, but this pot is already boiling on its edges. So I can put this here and mix it. And you know what? I'm just going to tell some other stories while this thing is boiling out, and I think we might be ready to can one jar pretty soon. Burns. You are likely to get a drop of water, boiling water, on your skin. Take it to the sink. Come on over. Ow! Ow! My hand is burning. Oh, that's hot. Ow! Ow! We're going to go to the sink, and we're going to show people how to do it first. Yes, you can do ice right away, but one of the best things you can do is cold running water. Now, what do the doctors tell you? The doctors tell you 10 minutes. That's a bit of an exaggeration. Yes, if you want to absolutely have a minimum number of symptoms, 10 minutes would be great. But you know what? If you had a minor burn and you just put it under here and you let it soak like right on this spot on my hand and just let the water run for minute and a half, 90 seconds, I can even feel the water getting colder in this pipe because it's coming from the well that's underneath the ground. My burn is feeling a lot better right now, and I'm not going to have blisters or anything like that later because I've really cooled down. The cold water is constantly sucking the heat away from my hand. Okay? That's the difference between this and ice. Could you use a piece of ice? Yes, you could. You go to your fridge, take a piece of ice, put it in a Ziploc bag, maybe add a little bit of water, wrap it up, and if you're lucky enough, burn is on a place where you can hold it with your fingers while you use the other hand. If you're not lucky enough, then you're going to have to use your hand and prop it up against that piece of ice. I prefer to go to the sink, just wash it down for a minute and a half, and then, you know what, I'm back to work. I'm going to leave. OMG, again, look at this applesauce. It is cooking away. Okay, I've got boiling water. I'm going to turn this down so I don't burn myself. But that is basically boiling applesauce. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is about a foot tall. When this is 3/4 full, I can do 8 quart jars at a time. 8 quart jars. What we have here today are pint jars. So here's my hand. This is a pint. 2 of these makes a quart. They sell a lot bigger jars. The more jars you can do with one batch of boiling water, the more time and energy and heat you're going to save. So it's good to know the pot that you will be using to do this, and you should get some practice. Good, that's boiling. Ladies and gentlemen, okay, there's no official product placement in this video, like the Ball Canning Company or the Taos Honey Company, but I like to buy honey in bulk. I pay more in advance. Yes, it costs some money up front, but then I am able to use, get it a lot cheaper. And so I take that same spoon that I was using that's in the hot boiling applesauce, which is really sterile, okay, or well on its way to sterile. This is hot, and I can get in there and I can grab a bunch of honey and put it in my applesauce. This is what I like to sweeten applesauce with. So there's nothing here but apples and honey. Nothing but apples and honey. It's as local as can be because I bought the honey from the local honey company. Okay, this is going to be some sweet applesauce because I put in quite a bit of honey because I've only got about that much applesauce in there. So immediately when I put that honey in there, temperature's going to drop a little bit, right? I need to get this back up to boiling. We want the way to avoid bacterial illness and infections in the United States and in industrialized countries in general. Really the entire world, just wherever you can, is to bring things up to temperature to keep your surfaces clean. Okay? We tend not to die of infectious diseases in industrial countries because we're careful and we have health departments that are on our butts all the time. You can't have dogs in your kitchen, you can't do this and you can't do that. There are reasons for this. We want to be safe, we don't want to put bacteria into our guts that are not helpful to us. So I mixed in, now that that water was pretty hot, right? It was boiling. I mixed the honey into that applesauce. I'm going to let it go back to boiling. While we're doing that, speaking of boiling, we're going to go look at temperatures. Come on over this way, ladies and gentlemen. So folks, here is a picture of our canning pot, a very, very large pot. I've exaggerated this. This would normally be a little bit smaller. I can only fit 8. This is a side view. So here's the pot, and here's the open pot where the water is. Normally I could fit 8 quart jars in this very large pot. So here's the situation. Water boils, so I've got bubbles here, right? I've got boiling water. This is the water level where this squiggly line is. And at sea level, water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay? But you know what? At Denver, which is at 5,000 feet, it boils at 202. It doesn't take as much heat to force these water molecules to say, I want to leave, I want to leave. And they evaporate and they escape this hot water because they have been brought to such a high temperature that they're bouncing around and like, I'm going to escape. In Taos, you know what? You only need to raise that temperature to 198 degrees. In plain English, at higher elevation, water boils faster and at a lower temperature. Folks, for us, those of us trying to keep bacteria away, that approach is danger because we need to keep everything as high a temperature as possible to kill those bacteria. So, for those of you who prefer the Celsius, water boils at 100 degrees Celsius and at sea level, but in Taos at 93. That means there's 93% as much heat to go into this water to get it to boil. So what's that going to change for us? It's going to change processing time. I have a jar that is full of applesauce. It's completely full of applesauce. There's a little bit of air at the very top. You should always have a 3/4 inch space, which is basically the height of the thread at the top of the jar. Do I have a jar? Okay. So here's that jar, and there's a little bit of thread on the side, right? I never want my sauce or peaches or whatever it is to go higher than this level. Okay? And the rest on the top is going to be air. And I'm going to put this, it's going to be about 185 when I take it, because remember there are apples and sauce mixed into it. When I close this jar and I put it into my water bath, this is my whole water bath, my water bath is going to be near boiling, okay, at 198. But I'm suddenly putting in a jar that's 185. I need to bring this jar and every other jar in the pot to the same temperature, as hot as possible, to kill off those bacteria. Folks, that takes time. Process, so we call that process times. And believe it or not, it's different for quarts than pints, because pint is a smaller jar. It's easier to surround that jar with hot water. So, at sea level, processing time after you've filled a jar with hot applesauce, processing time is 20 minutes. You need to get it to boiling and then leave it boiling for 20 minutes. Not 20 minutes from the time you put in the jars, 20 minutes from when you come to a boil after you've put the jars inside. Well, folks, we're at higher elevation. You don't get as high as the temperature. We need to get this jar to be hot, not just on the outside. When you first put that jar in, okay, the outside of it's going to be hot, right? And then after 5 minutes, then the heat starts to come in, and this is now at 198 degrees. But you know what? The center is still not as hot as the outside. It takes time for that heat to go from here all the way to the center of the jar until all of this is at boiling temperature. That's why you have to wait for all this time. Denver, 30 minutes. Taos, 35 minutes. If you want to be super, super, super safe, and you want to follow that canning jar book, and you want to make sure that people don't get sick, then you're going to bring it to a boil, leave it boiling for 35 minutes here at Taos' elevation. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now that we've talked about all those temperature concerns, let's go ahead and can at least one jar of sauce. So I'm going to grab my hot pad, and I'm going to lift the lid off of this. There's almost always going to be some drippage from that pot, so be careful. Find a place that you can put it off to the side. And I have left this on the lowest setting possible. Now I get to use my fancy tongs that are here to protect my hands, and I'm going to reach in for a jar. Now here's the situation. If this were full of jars, and if it were full of quart jars, then as I take out this jar, I need to get rid of the water, because I'm going to fill it in with applesauce. And if I don't do that and I let this water come out, and I put it with applesauce, then guess what? The water level is going to rise, and it's going to pop out of the pot. That's a problem. So instead, I'm going to fill it up with water, and what I have is I have another trusty rusty pot here, and I pour out the water. Give it a little shake, and I come over here. Now I can let go. I can open up my pot of very slowly boiling and hot applesauce. We call this the hot pack method, because I'm going to pack my sauce or my apples or my peaches or whatever into this jar when they're already hot. So I've mixed it, and if it stops boiling after you mix it, then you need to let it boil more. Remember this whole deal that the temperature inside this pot is not all the same. Our goal is to have all of the temperature of all the sauce and all the peaches or apples to all be the same temperature, and to ensure that they are boiling and that they are hot. I've got this awesome funnel here, and these funnels are designed to help you scoop your material into this canning jar without making a mess. How cool is that? All right. So I've got to take this, and if you could come over here, cameraman, I really like having the jar snuggled right up to the edge of my pot. So that, guess what? When I spill some, it just goes straight into here. I'm not putting anything on my counter. Every bit of sugar laying on the counter is just inviting bacteria and flies, right? We want to avoid flies. Because flies regurgitate, okay? They eat and then they come over and puke on your food and carry diseases like hepatitis. So we don't want that. So I'm gonna mix that. And you know what? I've got this handy dandy 1 cup stainless steel scoop, and I really love this. And I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna hold it over here, and I'm gonna pour in my sauce. And then if camera person, if you can come over here, and go take a side view. That's a little bit low, ladies and gentlemen. I would say that's about the height of my applesauce. I'm gonna get a little bit more, put it in the top, and that's probably enough. I'm gonna knock this. I always remember I have my plate here so I can keep all my stuff on the counter and not have sauce spilling all over the place. You never thought you need a magnet for this, but the cool thing about the magnet container, magnet stick, is that I can come over here and I can grab a lid without touching it. Which means I'm not getting any of the remaining bacteria on my hands on that pot. Uh-oh, I forgot a ring. I'm gonna go and get a ring. I take all my rings over with me to my canning area. I've got them on the side, right next to my pre-boiled lids. I'm gonna grab a lid. I'm going to let it drip away. Oh, before I do that, I need to have yet another. I usually use a napkin, like a disposable napkin at home. This is a clean one. And I'm going to wipe off the ring. Because if there are any food particles there, then that lid is not going to be able to make a good seal. I don't want any food particles between the glass and the lid. I want them to really snugly fit. So I've cleaned off the rim. Don't forget to clean off the rim. And grab the lid with my magnet, place it down gently. I actually just cover it and touch it with my ring, put the ring on, do a little bit like that, just a little bit, and then I take that rag. Sometimes it's nice for the rag to be a little bit wet, it gives you a better grip. And then I'm going to take it and hold my jar and then tighten it. And guess what? That jar is ready to go. I'm going to take this, I'm going to grab it using my super duper curved clamp. I'm going to grab it and put it in the pot. And what I do is I make sure that the water level is above my, my jar. And then after I've done that with all 8, you can fit 8 quarts into one of these pots. Okay, sometimes the quarts get a little tight. I had a recent experience where I was using my handy-dandy super-duper clamp and I was being really manly about it. I was like, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to shove those in and they're going to fit really well. Well, you know what? I broke the jar. Okay, and the way I knew that is because I lifted up the jar and all of a sudden the water stopped boiling. That's because all the applesauce that was inside that was not as hot as the boiling water instantly mixed with the water and brought the temperature down. So if you're going to finagle those jars to get them to fit 8 instead of 7, remember, the more you can do in a single batch, the less work you have to do. But if you're going to do that game with this pot, you have to do it gently. Okay? And if I put all 8 of my jars, I can almost guarantee you that the water's no longer going to be boiling. So then I need to take a lid, put it back on to save as much heat as possible, and turn it up and let that sucker boil for 35, once it boils, 35 minutes. That's if you're super safe. If you want to take your own chances and have it boil for less because you were super efficient and fast and you knew that the applesauce coming out of the pot was really, really hot, you could do less time, but that's not officially sanctioned and it's totally up to you. I wouldn't do that if I were selling this product to somebody else because I don't want somebody to get sick. So we're going to let this boil, and then when we're done, we're going to take them out and put them on the counter to cool. As they cool, remember that as that's boiling, that a little bit of air on the top, some of it's escaping because we're keeping that stuff boiling. and it's hot and it's expanded, but when you take the jar out, it's going to cool. And when it cools, the gas is going to contract, and it's going to suck the lid from being this shape to being that shape. And you will hear ding, ding, from across the room. Half an hour later, you will hear the little jars one by one going ding. And that means that they have sealed themselves because they've created a vacuum. They've sucked the lid down onto the jar. That's how you know that no more bacteria or air is going to get in there. So that's how you know you almost always have. Let's imagine I did 8 quarts of sauce. I'm going to have a few pints of sauce in my pot at the end. Folks, you don't have to waste that. Let me show you what you can do. Lentil soup, anybody? You can put meat in there, you can put anything you like. It's already hot water, right? You don't want to waste energy. You've spent all this propane or natural gas or electric heating that water up. You can throw in, lentils have a very, very small. They're really, and they have a tremendous surface area. These things in boiling water, they take 15 minutes to cook, and they're good to go. So if you were to put some of this into that pot and add some vegetables and some spices or some meat or whatever you wanted, you would have a soup. So I never waste the sauces that are at the bottom of my canning pots because I can use them for something else. Okay, while that's happening, I'm going to show you a couple of other techniques instead of canning. Let's take a couple of apples and go to the peeling station. Come on over here, Mr. Cameraman. So this is a, Vittorio, the Italians. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and peel this using the peeler corer combination. This part does the coring, this part does the peeling because it's on a spring, and it will follow the shape of your apple. Remember not to grab it here because this thing is sharp. I can pull back this lever, push the apple forward. Okay, and now peel and core at the same time. Mighty fine tool. Pull this off. I have a handy dandy fork around to pull the core off. That can go to the pigs or whatever. And here I have my apples. So, skins or no skins, it's your choice. I'm going to go ahead and take these half apple slices. It was my wife who chose this this particular brand of dehydrators. There are plenty of different brands. So and then that core peeler. This is about how thin those slices of apples are. I would say 3/16 of an inch. For those of you who like to go into those kinds of details, maybe not quite a quarter inch. And I'm going to spread these apples along. I seem to remember that these need to be dried out at the highest temperature. This thing is 165 degrees for, it takes actually 5 hours. It doesn't, I've looked at it, doesn't take that much electricity. I've got this tray. There's room for 5 of them. Okay, I could fill this up with 5 trays worth of sliced apples all at the same time. And this device is what, 1.5 by 2 feet or something like that. Sorry, 6. 6 total. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 trays. Okay. Then the controls are really easy. I turn on the time button. I get the maximum temperature. And then I'm going to hit it one more time to get the time, 8 hours. That's probably too much. So I'm going to move it up to 5 hours. I hit start. And there it is. It's 165 degrees for 5 hours. And it'll make a beeping noise when it's done. Let's say you have kids and they like fruit leather. You can buy these plastic containers, trays that go with this particular brand. And they come in a set of 5. And what you would do is you would take your apple sauce after it's been cooked and really maybe cook out some of the water and then spread it just like you would with a butter knife. make it nice and flat, you know, about that thin. Just shove it in the machine and make 5 trays. And on wax paper. On wax paper. Okay. So that it doesn't get stuck to this. Because then you'd have to scrape it, and it's really bad. So on wax paper, and then on this tray, and in the machine, and boom, you have homemade, healthy, maybe even local fruit leather for your kids.